Hello again and welcome to the program. I am Suren. How can people refrain from judging others they have no idea about? Believe it or not, there are people who would do just that. For instance, someone they know of talks about somebody else who happens to be an artist, a professional one producing great works of art, and other people who have never heard of him or her, although having seen his or her works, would attempt to deny all the truthfulness and the personality trends or existence of this artist. Yet they have never seen him and never discovered who he or she was, other than simply judging just for the sake of judging, and assuming that this person did not even exist. What would this mean to the person who initially has mentioned something of this nature? There are two things one can easily consider. One, either the person who is critical about everything and everybody, assuming, for example, what he or she is saying in order to make herself or himself look more than important, more than anybody else, due to their own misunderstood and unimportant judgments. Or, two, they are very keen to appear right all the time, and as if they really care for the person they are talking to. Now, these attitudes and trends are usually based upon their biases and assumptions, remembering they have no idea who the person they are talking about, as they have not seen or known anything of. However, there are ways to become less judgmental. There is a great need to distinguish the difference between judging actions and judging people. One needs to ask oneself what one really knows about the person they are judging. Good question. Reflecting, therefore, upon how it feels to be judged by oneself. One needs to notice the negative impact of judging oneself and one's own relationships. How can one become less judgmental and increasing in kindness, perspective-taking, and understanding? Judging people is not an effective way to bring change. We all know that. Judging sometimes may be a second nature to many people. And in these days, it seems as if they tend to judge us more. The higher their external reward would be, and which would make their resisting the urge even harder. The judge in the tweet seems to get more likes and retweets more, and it seems to get more likes. It seems more judging, the pundit, the higher the ratings and the greater the viewership will be. But we must also consider that judging can lead humans to a cesspool of incivility, bullying, polarization, and pain. That's a fact. These we need to stop as human beings. As someone who has been involved in the animal protection and environmental issues, social justice, and even women's rights movements for many decades writes about this, I have a lot of personal experience with judgmentalness. I have judged with best of them, even if I have tried to keep the expression of my judging with a narrow affair of close friends and family. Judy has used out despite my best intentions. In my 20s, she writes, I regularly approached people wearing fur with a smile on my face and judging them in my heart as if I handed them a card explaining the cruelty involved in their coat. I did. It was only after one woman in a full-length mink came up to me after reading the card and called me out of my hurtful look that I needed to consider. She told me she inherited the coat and explained of its sentimental value. That didn't change my opinion that wearing fur promotes and endorses animal cruelty, but it did not soften my judgmental attitude of her personality. Could I learn to separate judging people's acts from judging them as individuals? Yes, but not easily. 35 years after this incident, I'm still struggling with this challenge. As a solution, we are trying to build a culture in which judgment diminishes and perspective-taking, kindness, and understanding grow. Understanding others, their perspectives, is essential when solving problems using this solution process, because doing so supports the key step of considering all stakeholders' motives and needs so that our solutions truly do the most good and least harm to everyone and everything. As we metaphorically wipe our lens screen from prejudgments, we become more able to listen and learn, and the possibilities for finding common ground grow, even with those whom we may have previously labeled as others or them. Here are 4 ways to become less judgmental. At least I think so. 1. Distinguish between judging actions and judging people. There is nothing wrong with judging actions. One of the most esteemed professions in, say, the US has been a judge. Being a good judge requires careful listening, deep reflection, equality, and wisdom in order to determine what penalties should be imposed for specific actions. Judges are supposed to bring objectivity and clarity of thought, not judging us as they weigh their decisions carefully. So, go ahead and judge actions, but do your best to separate the act from the people who perpetrate them. The next steps will help make this first step easier. 2. Ask yourself what you really know about the person you are judging. We all have our histories and our baggage to carry. Remember? We all live with various levels of activity, apathy, hurt, denial, anger, and hypocrisy. We are, in fact, all imperfect. You can consciously choose to cut off the person you are judging some slack, even as you may strive to influence them to change their behaviors you believe are worthy of judgment. Some tend to judge others who are different of ethnicity, basically to eliminate their lives or to get rid of them, believing there is better race or nationality without realizing that they are hurting them and that they serve the country in which they also live. 3. Reflect upon how it feels to be judged to yourself. Surely you have felt the sting of others' judgments. How did that feel? Ask yourself if you really want to add to the suffering and pain of someone else. Unless the person has wronged you personally, chances are you don't. Let this reflection temper your judging. 4. Notice the negative impact of judgment on yourself and your relationships. There is no doubt that judges, particularly those self-made ones, can be pleasurable, albeit in an unhealthy way. It can create bonds with those who share those kinds of judgments. It can, as mentioned before, gain attention and even a following. But ask yourself if it makes you feel happier and healthier. Does it feel good to judge others? To perseverate on their imperfections? To talk ill of someone to a friend and then realize that your friend might be noticing that they too could be the object of your judgmental stance if they do something you think is wrong? Now imagine the reverse. What might it be like to let go of judgments and accept others with all their imperfections, even as you strive to influence them to take different actions? Might this be liberating? It's a question. You will need to ask yourself whether you really want to be less judgmental. If the answer is yes, pay attention when judgmental illness arises. For this to be a true resolution, you will have to be mindful of judging seemingly showing an endless appearance in your psyche. You might want to consider this resolution as a kind of mindfulness practice. Just as thoughts arise when we meditate, and we notice them and return to paying attention to our breath, judging will arise again and again, and we can return to paying attention to the 4 steps re-mentioned before. Stating that becoming less judgmental is the best New Year's resolution, if you think about it, and is admittedly hyperbolic, especially given that I could have suggested that we resolve to make choices across the board that do more good and less harm to others. But just imagine if we could build a culture in which judginess diminished and kindness, perspective-taking, and understanding grew. Might we work together more effectively as the solution that is better than criticisms and debaters to address our actual challenges, becoming less revved up by outrage and more fired up to build a more just healthy, and peaceful world. If a collective resolution could turn down the volume on endless criticisms and turn up the volume on compassion and wisdom, it is worth a try. Learn more about how to cultivate a solution in mindset to help you reduce judgment, increase compassion, and ethically tackle problems you are passionate about in the way of solution, transforming your life, your community, and the world for better. Take note. This was posted on Psychology Today on December 31st, 2021 and 22. What is the root cause of judging others? That's a good question. People judge others as a natural cognitive process, most definitely influenced by social norms, personal experiences, and psychological biases. It often stems from one's need to assess threats, establish social hierarchies, or reinforce one's own beliefs and values. Mark Robbins asked this question: why do we judge others, and how can that be a gift? He says, in answer to it, it is crucial to distinguish between making value judgments and being judgmental. Value judgments reflect our discernment based on our values and priorities. We constantly make value judgments in our daily lives, normally deciding what to eat, where to go, who to engage with, and how to spend our time. Embracing change and diversity while making value judgments is vital for our well-being, personal growth, empowerment, and overall vitality and health. Being judgmental, on the other hand, has to do with us thinking that our opinions and values are right in judging others as bad or wrong. This may sound like semantics, but it is not. It is a whole different paradigm. Being judgmental has to do with us arrogantly thinking that we are better than others. But are we? The question is not whether judging people is good or bad. The deeper issue is that when we judge others, we hurt them and ourselves in the process. Believe it or not. Why do we do that then? Well, we judge others as a natural cognitive process, influenced by social norms, personal experiences, and psychological biases. It often stems from a need to assess threats, establish social hierarchy, or reinforce our own beliefs and values, as we already mentioned before. Judgment can serve as a shortcut for understanding and navigating complex social environments. We may be competing with others and want to win, or at least not let them win. When we don't win, we feel inferior or envious. So we tend to judge them, make them wrong, or try to find fault in them. In other words, we try to bring them down to our level so we can feel better about ourselves. We project our stuff onto other people. As late, great author Debbie Ford once said, "Whatever you cannot own, owns you." In other words, aspects and qualities of other people that we have not accepted within ourselves. For example, if we have not accepted our own arrogance, we will notice lots of arrogant people around us and have a very hard time with them and with the equality of arrogance in general. Now think about it. Similar to projection, everything we see, experience, and notice about other people and life is a mirror reflecting back to us the light and the dark. We erroneously think it is about them and miss the gift of awareness, which is also for us. We will always bump up against stuff in others and in life that we need to deal with in ourselves. But it is often much easier to judge than it is to deal with, right? Judging people can be a gift when it prompts self-reflection and growth. Constructive judgment can highlight areas for improvement, inspire empathy, and foster deeper understanding of ourselves and others. It serves as a tool for personal development and building healthier relationships, ultimately leading to greater self-awareness and fulfillment. Our judgments of valuable insights, revealing areas in ourselves where we can nurture love, acceptance, and reconciliation. They indeed illuminate opportunities for personal growth, expansion, and release, paving the way for forgiveness and authentic confidence. When we are being judgmental, it can remind us about the importance of compassion for ourselves and others. The things we judge in others, which are always the things we judge within ourselves, consciously or unconsciously. And they truly are simply things we don't have much compassion for. We can use our judgments as opportunities to expand our capacity for compassion. One of the most powerful emotions we can express and experience in life. Dealing with our own judgments in a vulnerable, honest, and responsible way can actually bring us closer to the people in our lives and create deeper intimacy. When we control our judgments and other aspects of our shadow, we free ourselves from barriers to intimacy, vulnerability, and closeness with others. This demands courage and dedication, yet engaging authentically at this level can profoundly transform our relationships for the better. There is nothing wrong with us for being judgmental. It is a normal aspect of being a human. And while judgment can and do cause a great deal of difficulty and pain in our lives and relationships, especially if we stay unconscious or ignorant about them, as we wake up and take responsibility for them, we can use our own judgmental tendency to actually create a kind of life and the kind of relationships we truly want. There are deep treasures in our judgments. If we are willing to do the work necessary and confront them in ourselves with ruthless compassion and vulnerable truth. Keep it in mind. Consider these questions. Whom do you judge? What is underneath your judgment? What are some of the gifts of this? What are your thoughts? And many people have truly appreciated this when we have spoken before. When and if someone treats you very poorly, it is easy to say to yourself, this person is in a lot of pain. It is the spiritual thing to do, believe it or not. But what to do, or what to do about it? What do you do about it? If you walk away, would that avoidance serve you well? Do you also think this way, or do you think them for being like teachers in your life? It really is fair to assume that they may be tremendous self-judgments, and they are not okay with them. In fact, I am very curious about your perspective on this. The psychology of being judgmental involves a range of factors, including insecurities, where judging others serve as a defense mechanism to boost low esteem or deflect from one's own flaws. It is also a cognitive shortcut for navigating the world, involving rapid, automatic type of thinking that can lead to errors like the fundamental attributions error. Emotional triggers, such as the anxiety or shame, can feel like judgmental thoughts, while cultural norms, social hierarchies, and desire to maintain a sense of belonging by defining who is in or out also playing a role. Insecurity and lowest self-esteem, criticizing others can temporarily make someone feel superior, or as a coping mechanism to manage feelings of inadequacy. You have heard it right. Individuals might project their own undesirable traits and or insecurities to others, finding it easier to criticize them than confront those aspects within themselves. Judgment can be a way to avoid confronting difficult emotions like shame, guilt, or anxiety by focusing on others instead. What about cognitive biases? Type 1 thinking, rapid, automatic thinking, can lead to snap judgments based on insufficient information. Fundamental attribution error. The tendency to attribute others' behavior to their personal traits while overlooking situational factors, and vice versa for one's self. Judgmental attitudes can reinforce social hierarchies and create a sense of belonging by defining who is excluded. Some may use criticism to control others or make themselves feel more powerful. Social norms. Consider. Cultural expectations and values influence what behaviors are deemed to be acceptable or unacceptable, shaping perceptions and judgments. What about modeling? Well, people can learn judgmental behaviors by observing others, making it a perpetuate habit. What about misunderstandings? Different perspectives, values, and communication styles across generations or cultures can be misinterpreted as critical behavior. Consequences of being judgmental. Think about it. Emotional distance. Toxic Judgment can erode trust, create resentment, and distance people emotionally. What about self-judgment? A habit of judging others can ironically lead to increased self-criticism and a cycle of judgment that is difficult to break. Are we talking about misinformation? Well, sometimes. Judgmental people can live in an inaccurate understanding of reality, and they may not receive authentic feedback from others who are afraid to challenge them. And so, why do we judge others and ourselves? This is a subject which was also featured in Psychology Today, one of the magazines I really like reading. Hilary Jacobs said, "Understanding emotions helps make sense of our biases." We can understand the judgmental thoughts as emotional projection. Emotions like anxiety, shame, and guilt can fuel our judgments. Bringing awareness to the emotions that underlie our judgments helps us feel more connected and compassionate. Keep it in mind. Emotional awareness. Consider, there is nothing that helps a relationship more than emotional awareness. The willingness to own and be accountable for our own emotions, anxieties, and defensive reactions, and to talk about them leads to understanding, connection, compassion, and resolution of conflicts. Through awareness of emotions, we gain the necessary skills to slow down our reactivity so we can respond thoughtfully to others with compassion instead of judgments. She also mentions of the change triangle, which is a universal and practical guide showing how emotions work in their mind-body system. Considering the epidemic levels of violence in our world, anxiety, depression, and trauma in modern societies, we should learn about emotions and change that triangle in the school level, even high school if you like, where we also learn the things which totally teaches us to name and tend to our own core emotions. Instead of two people judging, accusing, and blaming each other, we can instead stop a negative interpersonal cycle and communicate on a deeper level, noticing and validating the core emotions under our judgments cultivate a space for self-reflection and constructive communication. As we consciously make a choice to move aside our judgmental stance and tune into our body to notice the other underlying emotions, we may discover a new society, shame, guilt, or any of the other core emotions at the bottom corner of the change triangle. We will talk about that in a later time. This can set the stage for transformation. We can diminish our triggers, changing for the better, even how we think and feel. For instance, had the therapist helped someone needing to be helped become aware of the emotions underneath her or his words and conscious thoughts, she or he might find her and or his agency being better able to express herself or himself in the future, saying something like, "The way you are talking to me doesn't feel good." An emotional exploration provides a wonderful opportunity to process traumas and even childhood wounds. This would enable the person in question to become less reliant on defenses and live a more open-hearted life with vitality and an increased sense of connection. That is, the sense of feeling connected to our emotional beings. The human mind will always make snap judgments, yet all people and every relationship benefit from emotional awareness. By noticing the emotions that fill our judgments, we gain new knowledge to grow with and connect authentically. Let's talk a little bit about things in regard to estrangeness from a parent situation with adult children who happen to be very judgmental. While this situation is not uncommon, it still remains a taboo and can bring harsh judgments. People think through erroneous decision making to become estranged for years and even attempt reconciliation. Many people assume child-parent estrangement must result from immaturity and anger, but it may not be true. In a family situation of an estrangement, especially when initiated by an adult child, remains a mark of shame, despite all the recent psychological research that has been conducted reporting that it is not uncommon. Some sympathetic attention by mainstream media and the publication of 2 mainstream books, which at least drag the subject out of the shadows. Dr. Joshua Coleman is a psychologist, and his book Rules of Estrangement seeks to help estranged parents. Dr. Carl Tillema, on the other hand, is a sociologist, and in his book Fault Lines promotes reconciliation. Let's keep in mind, when parents cut a child out of their lives, the governing assumption is that they must have a very good reason, since their action runs counter to everything we believe about the enduring and inviolable nature of parental love. It is true that the prevailing narrative has been challenged in some circles, though not necessarily all, as with the stories of parents who threw kids out for being gay or trans or not adhering to their religious beliefs. But those stories are relative outliers because the cause is easily spotted, and you either take the parent's side or not. What about the bottom line? Well, it is culturally easier to tolerate a parent cutting an adult child off. The following taboo has the backing or backup of a biblical commandment, which advises us to honor our mothers and fathers as well as deeply held ideas about filial obligation and a never-ending gratitude. We are supposed to feel for those who put us on the planet and took us in, who fed, clothed, sheltered, and educated us, and paid for all of those things. Correct? Since those happen to be legal requirements, it is actually not snarky to note that if that were all that is required of a parent, an orphanage would be an ideal one. The situation can be reversed. Even though recent psychological research substantiates that a decision by an adult child to estrange from family is long thought out and a process that may include periods of attempt to reconciliation by the adult child, the culture still frames it as a fit of pique or anger and a sign of immaturity. The author has found the decision to estrange as being almost always deeply thought, worried about, and revisited in thousands of people she has heard of from over the years, and their stories echoing affected people's own experiences. The truth is that most people are more comfortable imagining an adult child fit of pique than a neglectful, emotionally absent, or abusive parent. But it can be vice versa. When someone is confiding a painful truth, there is actually no need to say anything at all. But if you feel compelled, it would be great if you could steer clear of the ones listed. One needs to stop wallowing in the past and move on. That goes for both parent or the child. The past is the past thing, which is wrongly believed in by many to be a motivator, which most definitely is not. The idea of moving on as quickly as possible is, unfortunately, thought to be helpful in painful situations, as if emotional pain has an expiration date. And people recover from such a loss of their own pace and speed. The word wallow is a nasty one, and needing to process emotional experience is a sign of strength and not a character flaw. Take it or leave it. Let's stop our episode here for today until we meet you again here by the next episode. Thank you for sharing and thank you for watching. And thank you.